In Canada, 4 people are killed every day and 190 are injured due to impaired driving.
There's no need to get behind the wheel while you're drinking. I mean, there's so many other options out there. Get a taxi. You can crash at the place that you're at. I'm sure they won't care. It's a lot better than spending the night in a ditch, the night in a jail cell, or even a night in the morgue.
You're not supposed to be picking out caskets for your children when they're 26 years old.
Drinking and driving is a major problem. It affects families, friends, and even strangers. If it's such a major problem, then why do we continue to do it? I could go on forever with different statistics about drinking and driving, but the most important stat of all is that for every single injury and death caused by impaired driving, it is totally preventable. For those of us who choose not to drink and drive, it can be hard to prevent the actions of those who do. For Margaret Miller and her family, there's nothing they could have possibly have done to change what happened on May 16th, 2004.
The yard was full of cars and the house was full of people and the party was underway and we had a great evening. You know, it was too bad that Bruce hadn't been here. You know, that would have made it just a perfect evening. But we went to bed and 3 o'clock in the morning the phone rang. And it was the Deputy Chief of Police from Spring Hill. And he told my husband that Bruce had been involved in a head-on crash, that he had serious head injuries, that he was in Charlottetown Hospital as we were speaking, and that we should get there as soon as possible. A little later they had decided to transport him to Moncton Hospital, and we had found that out just before we left the house. I mean, you can't imagine what that's like, getting that phone call. My husband was there and he was so upset, you know, at the thought, you know, that something could happen, and we were just all numb. You know, you're getting ready, you're calling people, you're yelling in the house, and a lot of friends had spent the night, of course, because they had been drinking, you know, so we were scrambling around to find drivers. You know, we knew we had to get to Moncton right away. We got in to the hospital, and right behind us came the ambulance from PEI. The whole day had passed with a little bit of hope, and then a lot of hope, and then no hope. They had determined that he was brain dead. So I said, there is no hope then. And the guy said, no. He says, we have signed the death certificate. He says, have you thought about organ donation? It was a beautiful day, and you're thinking, the sun shouldn't be shining today. This is the worst day of the worst day ever, the worst day of my life. How can the sun be shining? And it was so numb. You know, you were just numb, and you were looking, and you were driving home, and we got back to the end of the lane again and looked up, and the yard was full of cars again. The night before, they had been celebrating a birthday, and that night we were mourning the loss of our child, and it's unbelievable.
The cause of the crash that killed Bruce Miller was no accident. It was actually 100% preventable. The driver who hit Bruce that night was heavily intoxicated. He had a blood alcohol reading of .243, which is 3 times over the legal limit.
When we first found out it was an impaired driver, it was just like, this cannot be true. How could somebody, this is so senseless, so futile. I can't even find the right words to describe it. You know, it's so frustrating, it's so maddening. You're thinking, you know, this shouldn't have happened. And then you're thinking, well, what happened to that drunk driver? You know, if a drunk driver killed Bruce, where is he? What can we do about him? And then we found out that he was killed. And it was almost a little bit of a relief. At least we don't have to deal with that. And I know that his family must be feeling the loss and everything terribly too. They must be. But at least we don't have to deal with that.
Losing a family member is never easy. But imagine losing a loved one because they were killed by a drunk driver. For Margaret and her family, their lives changed drastically after the loss of their son.
The innocence is gone in your life when you thought that things could not happen. You know, things like that can't happen, but they can happen, and they do happen to all too many people. You know, we were innocent in our lives. We thought that that harm couldn't touch us. I don't know why. Because we're just like every other Canadian family, you know. Every other North American family, we can all be touched by impaired driving. And unfortunately, too many people are.
The crash that claimed the life of Bruce Miller and those that kill countless others happen every day. Unfortunately, there's nothing we can do to change what happened in the past, but there are lots of people working to change what happens in the future. It's hard to go even one day without seeing some type of ad telling us not to drink and drive. And there's lots of people working to help educate youth on the dangers of drinking and driving. One person who is trying to make a difference in the community is Constable Justin Kennedy of the New Minas RCMP. Constable Kennedy says there's lots going on to try to reduce drinking and driving.
Yeah, the RCMP is definitely tackling this problem head on. We have various programs. We're very involved in the school. We have school liaison officers. Actually, that's their whole job, is to go out in the school and teach the DARE program, which is drug and alcohol awareness, and as part of the curriculum for that, drinking and driving is heavily targeted. We have the Stetsons and Spurs youth program, where youths from 12 to 18, or 13 to 18, sorry, can come and join, and we teach them all the values of, responsibility and not to drink and drive.
Another program which is raising awareness is Students Against Drunk Driving, or SAD, which is run by Constable Angie McQuaid. She is the Community Policing Coordinator for the Kentville Police.
It was an idea that I thought about getting involved with about 4 years ago, and started it here at NECIC at Northeast Kings, with the idea that students could make a bigger impact on other students by getting the message out that, hey, this is a stupid choice to make. So it's grown from 3 people involved with SAD to now we have about 30. So it's really quite an impressive group.
Grade 12 student and SAD member Jessica Nichols says despite Don't Drink and Drive campaigns, it's still a big problem among teens.
I think a lot more than people would picture. I think it does definitely. I've seen people do it, and haven't been involved directly, but I know people who do it, and they do it on a regular basis.
Jessica also says that popularity and image affects some students from speaking out against drinking and driving.
It kind of depends who the person is, like the group of people that they're involved with. I think some people, they would encourage it and they would just go along with it. I think other people would kind of take a stand and say something to stop it, but it really varies depending on where the person kind of fits in, like what group they're involved with.
Constable Kennedy says it's important to reach people when they're young.
And, it's kind of we want to instill the good values in them, and really beat the message into them that drinking and driving is one of the most preventable things out there, and all it takes just responsible planning beforehand, before you go out partying or drinking. There's no need of it. It's so preventable.
Constable McQuaid agrees, saying young people have to realize what's at stake before they get behind the wheel drunk.
It is the #1 killer among youth, ages 16 to 25. I think you can't educate enough about it.
People are warned daily about the dangers of drinking and driving. We see stories on the news and commercials on TV about the horror stories that result from impaired driving. It's obvious that nothing good comes from drinking and driving, so why don't people get it?
Maybe possibly because the convenience of it and the lack of planning beforehand. A lot of people will go to a party, and they'll say, well, I'll just bring a 6-pack, bring my truck, drive over there, whatever happens, happens. But I mean, if you do that, you're way too inclined to make a bad choice later on in the night. Also, I mean, we're seeing that the older population are doing the vast majority of impaired driving. And I mean, back then, it wasn't really, I wouldn't say accepted, but it's kind of a common practice for them. And I mean, they just kind of grew up with it. So I mean, that could be another reason why people do it constantly.
Dale Grutchie is an addiction services counselor and an instructor at NSCC Kingstead campus. Dale says the more someone drinks, the more likely they are to make bad decisions.
When people consume alcohol, their judgment becomes quite impaired. And the more alcohol a person consumes, the more impaired their judgment becomes. Now, for some people, they're well aware that their thinking is impaired, but